Yeah. They're very wise. They take care of themselves. They may be, in some ways, the most free country,
on the planet.
Large nation on the planet.
Yeah, yeah. And, in fact, a lot of it comes, of course, from the incredible suffering of Stalingrad, Leningrad, and all through prehistory, all the way back to the serfs and the czars.
Well, think about the whole Zionist Bolshevik slaughter machine that liquidated between 30 and 50 million people in the early part of the last century.
And the impact on all the subgroups within Russia.
Exactly.
I used to read Russia Today when I was a child way back in the 60s, and it was interesting seeing the propaganda and living in Europe and seeing a lot of the way the Russians are having to take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The issue, too, for getting back to the Iran, let's tie in, first off, real quick, your first guess with the Stevensville UFO and the current situation in Gaza and the Obama situation. And we can do it very easily based on this particular line of thought about symbology. And the symbology that was used in the Obama campaign, if you'll go and look at it closely, there's a number of sites, I think, that are out there analyzing it, actually. The large swoop of the O and all of these other subcomponents to it point to sacred geometry. And the sacred geometry comes into mind because that's based on the idea that within every sphere you can place a tetrahedron such that if one point of a tetrahedron is at its pole, the other 3 points of it will arrive at 19.47 degrees latitude. And a harmonic of 19.47 degrees latitude is 33 degrees. 33 degrees, of course, is being the prime number for the Masons, the Templars, and also for the Zionists. And 33 degrees is close enough to the actual latitude of Stevensville, which is 32 degrees. And coincidentally, it's also the latitude of Israel, Iraq, etc. So there's a real constant in our planet throughout all of this that I think relates all of the current actions of the Zionists and their grand game, if you will, the pushing back and forth of these various armies and attempting to seize particular spots of the planet. And then we can even tie that back to my current situation with the weather at this stage, because we're getting this huge atmospheric river coming up from Hawaii. It extends almost that far. Are you in that weather pattern?
I watch it on the. Oh yeah, I watch AccuWeather, the Western,
but you're not
Eastern Pacific.
Hit by it at the moment.
No, below it.
Oh, okay. We're going to expect.
You're right in the main line of it. It's just
20
pouring
inches of rain by Friday.
Really?
Very exceptional. Usually we'd get maybe 10 inches down in Potlatch, the wettest point just slightly to the north of me here. But they're saying up to 20 inches because it's now carrying, the atmosphere out of the Pacific is now carrying twice the amount of moisture previously ever recorded as normal.
Why?
Well, this has to do with a couple of things. The change in the atmosphere and the point where it's originating, which, of course, is Hawaii, which is at 19.47 degrees. So it's one of these energetic points on the planet. So, and then there's the other aspects of it. It has to do with what we think will come out from a NASA whistleblower sometime in March or April or May. We're a little inexact here, and we're trying to hold on to our inexactitude. But due to
I like that. That's a good word.
Yeah, and it helps us.
It's a 39-cent word. I like that word.
And at our point here is that we think a series of events will occur relative to the economy that will lead to a contraction in the federal government.
Well, what economy? Sorry.
Excuse me, to the financial system, not the economy. The two are separate. The economy is going to ongo and actually evolve. And if people wanted to take steps to place themselves into the new economy that will appear in, say, 5 or 8 years, they should start studying electrics. Not electrical engineering, but electrics at fundamental levels, because we're going to make some significant breakthroughs in that, I think, late this year. That will lead to a whole new class of industry.
I think we already have, and they may finally rear their magnificent potential. And so many things are locked away, folks. It's ridiculous. I'm looking at the northeastern satellite picture now, as you have seen, and that river of moisture it's got to be
coming up from 32 degrees latitude.
Yeah, and it's also practically, it's at least 3,000 miles long.
And we're at 5,000 miles on our Pineapple Express here with its tons of water. We're getting into this weird banding on the planet again, which, of course, is coincidental with the big uptick in radiation coming out of the far planets in our solar system.
Look at that.
Just recent.
That's wild. All right, keep your umbrella ready. And we'll be right back. Hi, back in living color, as they say on radio. Stan Freberg used to say that, I think. He was wonderful. Okay, that is quite a band of moisture. It looks exactly like a river.
That's what they're calling it, is a double amount of our usual river in terms of the Pineapple Express. Yeah, it's a river in the atmosphere. And such is an interesting sign as well, because if we look at both of these storms, the one in the east and the one out here, as harbingers of the future, we may be looking at something that was described in the 50s by Isaac Asimov and relates to climate change, because he was of the opinion that extreme levels of melt in the glaciers would produce a condition in the oceans in which huge amounts of fresh water would enter, and that we would see a change in the atmosphere at the same time.
Why, easier to uptake the water with less salt?
And hold out a lot more water.
Really?
And this is actually the saving grace to global warming, so to speak, in the sense that if we were lucky as a species, and we reach this point in time, then we would get these giant rivers that would bring up moisture beyond anybody's ability to understand in places that we would not usually expect it at that level. And Seattle may get a lot of rain, but we don't usually get it in torrents like this for these kind of persistent periods. But anyway, his thought was that could possibly trigger the winter of snow that went right into a summer of snow, and that would lead a new ice age. And that's the only thing that saves the ocean in a time of warming. And without the oceans, the rest of the species on the planet are pretty much toast.
Well, that's what Robert Felix said. The ice just it forms because the snow doesn't melt, and it snows again and again and again. That's how it happens. They're not calling it global warming as often as they're calling it climate change now. They're kind of hedging their bets of fakes.
When we first started this work and we became aware of it here at Half Past Human, I started writing about it. Maybe 2002 or so, we started labeling it sudden catastrophic climate change, because a lot of the indicators are that it happens a lot more rapid than anyone would give it credence for. They say, for instance, that England separated as a landmass from the area of Europe at the rate of 93 centimeters every 5 years or something. And that's probably erroneous. All they did was simply measure the amount of time that it supposedly took against the distance, 26 miles, and came up with this number.
You know, I agree. I've always felt that they talk about how mountain ranges are formed over hundreds of millions of years.
Right.
I don't buy into that.
No, there's actual evidence we have, especially around the area of Lake Titicaca, that it happens in the course of days. There's a suggestion that Lake Titicaca, which is now at 11,000 plus feet in the Andes, was a seaport, and then less than 7 days later was over 10,000 feet in the air, and half its populace had died, and its populace was quite numerous.
Pole shift could do it. Magnetic pole shift,
or any number of other things.
I mean, the crustal plates are really, they're sitting on a fluid mantle, and they can slosh around anywhere.
And beyond that, we may be dealing with the plasma expansion issue, and that relates to the idea that there's that reality as we understand it, or as we've been told in school, does not exist. Atoms are not little tiny rocks whizzing around in a little microspace. And in fact, electrons don't move around the neutron and don't even exist as we understand it. Instead, it's all an incredibly complex interaction of all of these various different kinds of fields that we can think of as like electrical energy.
The electric universe.
Correct. And if that theory is correct, which it appears to be a lot more correct than anybody else's theory,
you bet.
Then we're getting this pulse at the rate of about 22 trillion times a second from the middle of the universe, which instantaneously is traveling through time-space, not space-time, so it takes no time whatsoever, and it goes to the middle of all objects in the universe, including all suns and all planets, and then all other, when you're on the planet, every other creature.
What a pulse.
Correct, with this pulse, 22 trillion times a second. Now, this is energy coming in, and at some point, because of the constraints in the middle of these various things that we call planets, the energy converts to matter. It would make sense to postulate that it would form itself not instantly as highly complex interactions of electrical fields, but as the more simple versions, which we mistakenly refer to as helium, hydrogen, and so on. So it may be that we're forming gas under pressure in a plasma environment, which is one of the definitions for fusion. and we're actually in the middle of our planet. We don't have a giant molten core of iron whizzing around because
never bought into that.
No, molten metal cannot hold a magnetic charge. It doesn't matter how big the thing is, right? And you can't generate a magnetic charge from molten metal as quote, friction on the underside of the mantle. It just makes no sense whatsoever. But it could be, and especially look at where the storms are originating now and the earthquake activity on the planet, it makes a lot of sense that the hyperdimensional model of physics is correct. If that is the case, hyperdimensional physics supports the idea of a plasma expansion. So the Earth is actually growing in size. This may account for the...
Someone else raised that less eloquently on this program some years ago, that the Earth, the planet itself, was growing. And even if the poles were all to melt because of the growth of the planet, the oceans would never rise as much as people think.
I believe that to be the case. It's my understanding.
You follow that clearly, obviously, and
there are certain issues here with the idea of giant tsunamis and overcoming the total land masses and so on. Plus, you can factor in such strangeness as the idea of the homeostasis pressure of pumping blood up the neck of a brontosaurus, and the amount of gravity that would be required versus the amount of pressure that would be required under today's gravity. If, for instance, we had a brontosaurus here, they would die instantly because our current state of gravity and magnetic force, the amount of pressure required to pump blood up to their brain, however small, still needs blood, would be such that it would no cellular structure, organic as we understand it, could withstand the internal pressure, and it would just blow itself to bits. So the postulate, therefore, is that at the time the dinosaurs existed, gravity was smaller. What could account for that? Well, a smaller planet. And a difference in the energetic activity that forms that smaller planet.
You could work on this for a PhD, no?
No, then you're just an academic. The idea of peer review, letting the dumbest among us decide what should be published.
You're the last person who would play that game.
Exactly. I could barely stand school long enough. In my opinion, I'm sort of like Mark Twain, college education, no offense to anybody at all, in my opinion, is just demonstration that you can sit there and sit still while they spoon-feed you for 4 years.
Well, now more so than ever. And sit there while your parents pay for it. Or you go into debt for the rest of your life. Or
that won't be happening